I have finally finished Ulysses, and my God, what a beast of a book to get through. Um, it it's a work of genius, to be sure. It is not a book, however, that I could recommend to most people, and I'll get to that why in a little bit. So this edition is the Modern Library edition. And what I really like about this one is that in the beginning it has it's got a foreword, and then it's got a court case, the decision of a court case, and it's because Ulysses was originally not allowed to be published in the United States before obscenity. They said it was too obscene, and so they didn't want to publish it. So then there was a court case that happened. It was the United States of America versus one book called Ulysses, Random House Incorporated. And so what they include here is the judge's final decision to allow Ulysses to be published in the United States. And I haven't read all the way through it, but it's very interesting to have that as the opener to the book. I'll read you the last few sentences here. It says, "I am quite aware that owing to some of its scenes, Ulysses is a rather strong draft to ask some sensitive, though normal persons to take. But my considered opinion, after long reflection, is that whilst in many places the effect of Ulysses on the reader is undoubtedly somewhat emetic, nowhere does it tend to be an aphrodisiac. Ulysses may therefore be admitted into the United States." That was 1933. Emetic, if you don't know, means inducing vomit or sickness. Aphrodisiac means inducing feelings of lust or that kind of thing. So he's basically saying it may make you puke, but it's not going to turn you on, so I'll let it in. I thought that was really funny. So there's 3 things I think you need to know about James Joyce, the author of Ulysses. The first is that he was a genius with what seems like an encyclopedic knowledge of Western literary canon and Irish poetry. Second thing you need to know about him is that he seems to have a perfect command of the English language. Now, I don't know if you can have a perfect command of the English language, or any language for that matter, but he seems to get as close as possible, and we'll get into that later on. The third thing you need to know about him is that he's a freak. Okay, he's into some weird stuff. Some of that stuff is in this book, some of it is not, but I got through it, and I could totally see why some people would call it obscene. Not that I would argue in favor of banning it, but there are some scenes in there that I had to put the book down for a minute. So what this book is about is there's essentially 2 main protagonists. One is Stephen Dedalus, who I have not read any other James Joyce, but if you have, you would know him as the protagonist from The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. He's kind of Joyce's self-insert, I believe. So Stephen Dedalus is a young man dealing with the trauma of losing his mother, and about half the book, give or take, follows him. And the other protagonist is Leopold Bloom, who is dealing with the reality of going about his day while his wife cheats on him at home, and he's aware of it. And so the book is about the 2 of them mostly, and their meeting as kind of father and son, as a kind of surrogate father and son, because if you read the book you'll realize that they both need that. But it's also not quite so simple and heartwarming as that would lead you to believe. The third point of view character is Molly Bloom. That's Leopold's wife. She only gets 1 chapter. It's the very last chapter in the book. So I don't know if I consider her a protagonist in the same way, but it is from her point of view. And that you get her whole perspective on things, and it's actually really interesting. So this book is very experimental. The prose is super dense, super elusive. It's Allusive, not elusive, allusive. References a ton of other texts, some of which I got, and many of which I missed. And so reading this book was a lot of times just like trudging through a dense fog, feet in the mud. Just it's so difficult to see where you're going or what's going on, and then all of a sudden it'll feel like you're flying. You'll just break into this beautiful prose section or just some kind of illuminating philosophical notion, and then a couple pages later you're back in the fog and the muck. That's what it felt like to me anyway. It's not a normal reading experience for sure. Now, the advice that I've heard and that I would also agree with in this book, if you want to read this book or anything similarly dense like Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, or Finnegan's Wake also by Joyce, is not to bog yourself down with getting all the details. Just understand that there are things that are going to go over your head, and just kind of listen to it like music, right? Experience it as it flows, kind of get into a groove with it. Enjoy the writing, because it's incredible writing. It's rhythmic, it's very effusive in places, it's stylistically unique. Just enjoy the ride is the gist of it. Now, some people would disagree with that. They would say, have a companion book, read along with it, try to get everything it's going to give you. And I would say, if you're going to come back and read it a second time, that would be good. But for your first time with something like this, I would say just enjoy the ride. Listen to it like music. So if you see my markers here, you might notice that there's a lot more in the beginning than towards the end. They get kind of sparse the further you go. That's because, as I mentioned, Joyce's command of the English language, he switched styles so effortlessly, and it just happens that the further along in the book you go, the more experimental it gets, the less there was I felt I could latch onto emotionally, the less I understood reading it. So I tended to prefer more of what was just going on at the beginning. That was more straightforward stream of consciousness. Still confusing, still dense, still difficult, but a lot more relatable in many places. Okay, I think that's all I have. I think I'm going to do this as a two-parter because I have quite a few quotes and I don't want to make a 2-hour-long video. So I'm just going to do about half of them and then finish it next time. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first one, as I mentioned, Stephen Dedalus, he's the protagonist for the first 3 chapters. It's his point of view, and he's dealing with the death of his mother. And so here this first chapter, he's talking with his friend Buck Mulligan, and there was, right after his mother died, Stephen's mother, he went to Buck's house, and Buck turns to, Stephen leaves to get some water for tea, and he overhears Buck turning to his visitor and saying, "It's only Dedalus whose mother is beastly dead." And that really hurt him, and so this is the conversation they have about that. So Buck doesn't even remember it. He says, "Yes?" Oh, let me find it. "Yes," Buck Mulligan said. "What did I say? I forget." "You said," Stephen answered, "oh, it's only Dedalus whose mother is beastly dead." A flush which made him seem younger and more engaging rose to Buck Mulligan's cheek. "Did I say that?" he asked. "Well, what harm is that?" He shook his constraint from him nervously. "And what is death?" he asked. "Your mother's or yours or my own? You saw only your mother die. I see them pop off every day in the Mater in Richmond and cut into tripes in the dissecting room. It's a beastly thing and nothing else. It simply doesn't matter. You wouldn't kneel down to pray for your mother on her deathbed when she asked you. Why? because you have the cursed Jesuit strain in you, only it's injected the wrong way. To me it's all a mockery and beastly. Her cerebral lobes are not functioning. She calls the doctor Sir Peter Teazle and picks buttercups off the quilt. Humor her till it's over. You crossed her last wish in death, and yet you sulk with me because I don't whinge like some hired mute from Lalouette's. Absurd. I suppose I did say it. I didn't mean to offend the memory of your mother. He had spoken himself into boldness. Stephen, shielding the gaping wounds which the words had left in his heart, said very coldly, I am not thinking of the offense to my mother. Of what then? Buck Mulligan asked. Of the offense to me, Stephen answered. Buck Mulligan swung round on his heel. Oh, an impossible person, he exclaimed. He walked quickly off round the parapet. You just get some great characterization here. Stephen dealing with the guilt of not praying for his mother as she was dying, but then trying to confide in his friend that, his friend said something that hurt him, and his friend gets super defensive and is like, what does it matter? It's just so relatable to me to make yourself vulnerable, to try and tell someone they hurt you, and then something like this happens where they dismiss you and tell you to get over it and it's your fault anyway and blah blah blah, all that stuff. It's not something a friend should do, I think. I don't have a lot intelligent to say about this passage. I found it very emotional. The next passage is on the next page, and it's just Stephen looking out over the bay. And this is just an example of the beautiful rhythmic prose that you find in this book. Wood shadows floated silently by through the morning peace from the stairhead seaward where he gazed. Inshore and farther out the mirror of water whitened, spurned by light-shod hurrying feet, white breast of the dim sea, the twining stresses 2 by 2. A hand plucking the harp-strings merging their twining chords, wave-white wedded words shimmering on the dim tide. A cloud began to cover the sun slowly, shadowing the bay in deeper green. It lay behind him, a bowl of bitter waters. Fergus's song. I sang it alone in the house, holding down the long, dark chords. Her door was open. She wanted to hear my music. Silent with awe and pity, I went to her bedside. She was crying in her wretched bed. For those words, Stephen, love's bitter mystery. Where now? Her secrets. Old feather fans, tasselled dance cards, powdered with musk, a gaud of amber beads in her locked drawer. A birdcage hung in the sunny window of her house when she was a girl. She heard old Royce sing in the pantomime of Turco the Terrible, and laughed with others when he sang, I am the boy that can enjoy invisibility. Phantasmal mirth folded away, musk-perfumed, and no more turn aside and brood. Folded away in the memory of nature with her toys, memories beset his brooding brain. Her glass of water from the kitchen, tapped when she had approached the sacrament. A cored apple filled with brown sugar, roasting for her at the hob on a dark autumn evening, her shapely fingernails reddened by the blood of squashed lice from the children's shirts. In a dream, silently, she had come to him, her wasted body within its loose grave clothes giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath bent over him with mute secret words, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Her glazing eyes staring out of death to shake and bend my soul, on me alone, the ghost candle to light her agony, ghostly light on the tortured face, her hoarse loud breath rattling in horror while all prayed on their knees, her eyes on me to strike me down. Liliata rudulantium te confessorum turma circumdet, jubilantium te virginum chorus excipiat. Ghoul, chewer of corpses, no, mother, let me be and let me live. That's a lot. That whole passage is incredible. There's a lot going on there, so let's go back a second. First, obviously the prose is it's just so visual and so sensual, using that word in a literal sense. It applies, it appeals to all the senses. You can almost smell the ocean. You can see the waves twining together, and later on it says a cored apple filled with brown sugar roasting for her at the hob on a dark autumn evening. Like that's, I can smell that image. It's so vivid. This memory of him going to sing to his mother, to a silly song to go cheer her up as she's dying. And then all the images of the dance cards and feather fans, imagining the parts of his mother that he never got to know, her life as a girl and adolescent. I think that's really sad and beautiful. And then near the end is him being haunted by his mother, him feeling the overwhelming pressure on himself to bring her some kind of comfort. It says, her glazing eyes staring out of death to shake and bend my soul on me alone. It's clear there's a lot he hasn't gotten over with his mother's death. At the end he says, ghoul, chewer of corpses. And it seems like that was something his mother said to him, because it says no mother, and let me be and let me live, just begging to be released from this guilt and this grief. It's so sad. So the Latin passage, which I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation of, but what that translates to is, may the lilied throng of radiant confessors encompass thee. May the choir of rejoicing virgins welcome thee. It's from the last rites given to Catholics when they're dying. It's, yeah, the brutality of someone's dying, the grief and the guilt, obviously we've talked about. It's just so, again, vivid and feels so real. Just beautiful and heartbreaking writing. I don't remember quite the context from this. I believe Stephen is just at breakfast with some people and they're just chatting and telling stories. There's a lot of scenes like that. Obviously there's nothing pointless in the book, but there's a lot of scenes where it's just people chatting. But this passage, had Pyrrhus not fallen by a beldame's hand, and Argus or Julius Caesar not been knifed to death, they are not to be thought away. Time has branded them, and fettered they are lodged in the room of the infinite possibilities they have ousted. But can those have been possible, seeing that they never were? Or was that only possible which came to pass? Weave, weaver of the wind. I mean, that's about determinism, fatalism, right? These things that happened destroy all other possibilities by their having happened. Nothing else other than Caesar being knifed can happen, because that's what did happen. Weave, weaver of the wind. Essentially, Stephen thinking, fate or God, do whatever you're going to do. It's about a lack of control, I think, over your destiny. A lack of being able to undo things that you regret. Stephen's mother's death is probably still on his mind in this scene. That kind of thing doesn't really go away. Could it have gone another way? That's a very relatable and sad question. So here Stephen is a teacher, and this child has stayed after school to get some help with his figures, his math. And here Stephen is seeing this kind of awkward, lonely kid and just relating to himself. It says, the kid's name is Sergeant. That's a interesting name, but it says, in long shady strokes, Sargent copied the data. Waiting always for a word of help, his hand moved faithfully the unsteady symbols, a faint hue of shame flickering behind his dull skin. Amor mattress, subjective and objective genitive. With her weak blood and whey-sour milk she had fed him and hid from sight of others his swaddling bands. Like him was I, those sloping shoulders, this gracelessness. My childhood bends beside me. Too far for me to lay a hand there once or lightly. Mine is far and his secret as our eyes. Secrets, silent, stony, sit in the dark palaces of both our hearts, secrets weary of their tyranny, tyrants willing to be dethroned. To me, I see a longing for connection here. He's talking, in the first paragraph, he's talking about how the love of a mother kind of saved this kid from pure annihilation. And I'm sure it seems like he feels the same. And then it says that they're both full of secrets and pain. And it seems, Stephen seems to think that they could confide in each other and maybe find some relief in, togetherness. But it says, too far for me to lay a hand there once or lightly. Realistically, is a student and he's a teacher. There's no bond between them, and he doesn't feel like he can bridge that gap. And so they both just sit with their pain and their secrets in silence. Very sad. I think I just liked this passage. It's talking about religious music. Some of that old sacred music is splendid. Mercadante, 7 last words, Mozart's 12th Mass, the Gloria in that. Those old popes were keen on music, on art and statues and pictures of all kinds. Palestrina, for example, too. They had a gay old time while it lasted. Healthy, too, chanting, regular hours, then brewed liqueurs, Benedictine, green chartreuse. Still, having eunuchs in their choir, that was coming it a bit thick. What kind of voice is it? Must be curious to hear after their own strong basses. Connoisseurs. Suppose they wouldn't feel anything after. Kind of a placid. No worry. Fall into flesh, don't they? Gluttons, tall, long legs. Who knows? Eunuch. One way out of it. So, this is from Leopold Bloom's perspective. And he's not religious, but he's at a church service, a funeral service, I believe. No, I don't think he's at the funeral service yet. Anyway, he's at a church service, a Catholic church service, and he's musing very disconnectedly on the beauty of old church music, and but it's this is kind of exemplary of Joyce's stream of consciousness style, where he kind of goes off on a tangent and random words come in. It's very disjointed and sometimes nonsensical, and that's what I think makes it, along with Faulkner, one of the best, most accurate stream of consciousness styles. It does make it harder to read, of course, but you still get some really beautiful stuff out of it, and you can piece it together over a long term, even if you don't get the moment-to-moment stuff. So this is where Leopold is in the funeral procession. His friend Paddy Dignam is dead, and obviously they're following the casket, the hearse, to the graveyard. And Bloom lost a son years ago. The son's name was Rudy. He was born, lived for 11 days, and then died. So much like Stephen's working through the grief of his mother dying, Bloom is still can't get past the death of his son. So he's at this in this funeral procession, and he sees a small casket going by, and so it says, White horses with white frontlet plumes came round the rotunda corner, galloping. A tiny coffin flashed by. In a hurry to bury. A mourning coach, unmarried. Black for the married, piebald for bachelors, dun for a nun. Sad, Martin Cunningham said. A child. A dwarf's face, mauve and wrinkled like little Rudy's was. Dwarf's body, weak as putty in a white-lined deal box. Burial-friendly society pays. Penny a week for a sod of turf. Our, little, beggar, baby, meant nothing. Mistake of nature. If it's healthy, it's from the mother. If not, the man. Better luck next time. Poor little thing, Mr. Daedalus said. It's well out of it. The carriage climbed more slowly the hill of Rutland Square. Rattle his bones over the stones. Only a pauper nobody owns. I mentioned earlier, Joyce is very rhythmic, and I think this is kind of where that rhythm is at its finest. It reads like a poem. Very intentional use of punctuation. You know, the periods between our, little, beggar, baby meant nothing. It creates this effect of, I don't know, it feels so desolate and hopeless to me. Rattle his bones over the stones, only a pauper nobody owns. I don't know that I have a lot to say about this, at least not much in the way of analysis. It's just, along with that first passage, of Buck Mulligan kind of berating Stephen, this is maybe one of the most emotional passages for me in the book. It's just so sad. Yeah. So Bloom is not religious, I believe I mentioned earlier, and the men in the funeral car with him are religious, and so they're talking about, you know, the resurrection of Christ and how that should bring some comfort to the living and the people who are going to die, because even though we may die, resurrected, and we'll be in heaven, and Bloom doesn't buy into that. Mr. Kernan said with solemnity, "I am the resurrection and the life. That touches a man's inmost heart." "It does," Mr. Bloom said. "Your heart, perhaps, but what price the fellow in the 6 feet by 2 with his toes to the daisies? No touching that. Seat of the affections, broken heart. A pump after all, pumping thousands of gallons of blood every day. One fine day it gets bunged up and there you are. Lots of them lying around here. Lungs, hearts, livers, old rusty pumps, damn the thing else. The resurrection and the life. Once you are dead, you are dead. That last day idea, knocking them all up out of their graves. Come forth, Lazarus. And he came 5th and lost the job. Get up, last day. Then every fellow mousing around for his liver and his lights and the rest of his traps. Find damn all of himself that morning. Pennyweight of powder in a skull. 12 grams 1 pennyweight. Troy measure. You can also see a bit of the humor here that Joyce had, you know. Come forth, Lazarus, but he came 5th and lost the job. This is what feels like a very modern, contemporary view of death, right? A very materialist view. Obviously, materialism is nothing new, but we kind of, at least I kind of have this idea that people were more religious back then, in the early 1900s. And, you know, here's Bloom, and he describes the brain, right, the essence of a human being, where some people might say your soul is, right? If the brain is gone, the soul's gone, whatever. I don't know if people say that, but, you know, the brain in modern day is how we define life. If the brain is functioning, we're alive. And he calls it a pennyweight of powder in a skull. Essentially, it's nothing. That humorous image of people on Judgment Day looking around for their lost organs. just calling the heart a broken pump. It's very cynical, and for a man who's not religious and has experienced such loss, it kind of makes sense that he'd have such a cynical view on death. What comfort is there in heaven? I don't think he finds any. So here you'll start to see a bit of the stylistic tomfoolery Joyce was getting up to. This chapter is punctuated by newspaper-style headlines. And this is, I think, just a really good example of characterization and how quickly and efficiently Bloom didn't write this book, how efficiently James Joyce can kind of paint a picture for you of some kind of person. So this little section's called A Day Father. He walked on through the case room, passing an old man, bowed, spectacled, aproned. Old monks, the day father. Queer lot of stuff he must have put through his hands in his time. Obituary notices, pubs ads, speeches, divorce suits, found drowned. Nearing the end of his tether now. Sober, serious man with a bit in the savings bank, I'd say. Wife a good cook and washer. Daughter working the machine in the parlor. Plain Jane, no damn nonsense. So old monks, this is the only time we see this character at all. He's barely even a character, but I feel like you can just see him standing there in his apron, old and bowed or bowed. Near the end of his tether now, just someone who's lived a quote proper life. Right? He did things right. He has a family, a job, and here he is near the end of his tether, near the end of his life, and he's still just working the day away. It's, for me, my favorite part is sober, serious man with a bit in the savings bank, I'd say. It just feels so mundane. Why save this money up if you're just going to work and work and work until you die? Very interesting. So it's the same chapter, same newspaper headlines, and they're talking about a case in which, if I interpreted correctly, and believe me, I may not have, they're talking of a case in which the Irish language, the Gaelic language, and the English language were being debated. Should Irish people have to speak English, right? And this is, I believe, a response to the person saying that they should have to speak English. And again, I may be remembering this wrong. Please correct me if I am. But I just love this speech. It's very over the top and melodramatic, but I don't know, I just like the language here. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, great was my admiration in listening to the remarks addressed to the youth of Ireland a moment since by my learned friend. It seemed to me that I had been transported into a country far away from this country, into an age remote from this age, that I stood in ancient Egypt, and that I was listening to the speech of some high priest of that land addressed to the youthful Moses. His listeners held their cigarettes poised to hear, their smokes ascending in frail stalks that flowered with his speech. And let our crooked smokes, noble words coming, look out, could you try your hand at it yourself? And it seemed to me that I heard the voice of that Egyptian high priest, raised in a tone of like haughtiness and like pride. I heard his words, and their meaning was revealed to me. From the Fathers. It was revealed to me that those things are good which yet are corrupted, which neither, if they were supremely good, nor, unless they were good, could be corrupted. Ah, curse you, that's St. Augustine. Why will you Jews not accept our culture, our religion, and our language? You are a tribe of nomad herdsmen. We are a mighty people. You have no cities nor no wealth. Our cities are hives of humanity, and our galleys, trireme and quadrireme, laden with all manner merchandise, furrow the waters of the known globe. You have but emerged from primitive conditions. We have a literature, a priesthood, an age-long history, and a polity. Nile, child, man, effigy. By the Nile bank the babe Marys kneel, cradle of bulrushes, a man supple in combat, stone-horned, stone-bearded, heart of stone. You pray to a local and obscure idol. Our temples, majestic and mysterious, are the abodes of Isis and Osiris, of Horus and Amun-Ra. Yours serfdom, awe and humbleness, ours thunder in the seas. Israel is weak and few are her children. Egypt is a host and terrible are her arms. Vagrants and day laborers are you called, the world trembles at our name. A dumb belch of hunger cleft his speech. He lifted his voice above it boldly. But, ladies and gentlemen, had the youthful Moses listened to and accepted that view of life, had he bowed his head and bowed his will and bowed his spirit before that arrogant admonition, he would never have brought the chosen people out of their house of bondage, nor followed the pillar of the cloud by day. He would never have spoken with the Eternal amid lightnings on Sinai's mountaintop, nor ever have come down with the light of inspiration shining in his countenance, and bearing in his arms the tables of the law, graven in the language of the outlaw. He ceased and looked at them, enjoying silence. So obviously comparing the Irish, the downtrodden, to the Jews of Israel and Egypt in the Bible. I think I would need to know more historical context to fully pick apart that comparison. I think it's a pretty clear oppressor versus oppressed comparison. But I read that whole section because just that last sentence, bearing in his arms the table of the law, graven in the language of the outlaw. And for some reason I just really love that phrase. Yeah. There's a lot in this book that I don't have anything really smart to say about. I just really like the words. This book has really challenged me to be okay with not understanding things. And I usually try to get all I can, but I would have never. I'd still be reading this a year from now if I was trying to understand all of it. So here Bloom is walking again, and this is more of his kind of stance on religion. A somber YMCA young man, watchful among the warm sweet fumes of Graham lemons, placed a throwaway in a hand of Mr. Bloom. Heart-to-heart talks. Me? No. Blood of the Lamb. His slow feet walked him riverward, reading. Are you saved? All are washed in the blood of the Lamb. God wants blood, victim. Birth, hymen, martyr, war, foundation of a building, sacrifice, kidney burnt offering, druids' altars. Elijah is coming. Dr. John Alexander Dowie, restorer of the church in Zion, is coming. So it's a very critical view of religion. He's saying that while Christians view blood as the saving force, right, washed in the blood of the lamb to be saved, right, Jesus' sacrifice, he points to all the cases in which God demands blood of his people. Births, hymen, martyr, war, foundation of a building, sacrifice, kidney burnt offering, druids' altars. Challenging the notion that God is completely giving selflessly of himself, and not, I don't know. It's someone who's, I think, very disillusioned with the world, and he lives in Ireland, which is super, super Catholic, especially at this time. And so that he's very, I think, sick of that kind of thinking, that God is some force for good, when we can see all these cases in the world where following God leads to destruction. In the Bible, even asking for sacrifices, people using religion as a tool of oppression. The Crusades, obviously, the Inquisition, all that stuff. Another interesting thing to point out is that Bloom, when he reads Blood of the Lamb, he starts to see his own name in it first. Blue, me? No. And that is kind of indirectly comparing himself to Jesus. which is kind of interesting for someone who doesn't believe in religion. It's an implied comparison, right? It's not him doing it consciously, but it's just interesting. Okay, yeah. Still Bloom. More of this just disjointed stream of consciousness. Cityful passing away, other cityful coming, passing away too, other coming on, passing on. Houses, lines of houses, streets, miles of pavements, piled up bricks, stones, changing hands. This owner, that. Landlord never dies, they say. Other steps into his shoes when he gets his notice to quit. They buy the place up with gold, and still they have all the gold. Swindle in it somewhere. Piled up in cities, worn away age after age, pyramids in sand, built on bread and onions. Slaves, Chinese wall, Babylon, big stones left, round towers. Rest rubble, sprawling suburbs, jerry-built, Kerwin's mushroom houses built of breeze, shelter for the night. No one is anything. So his more of his very cynical thoughts on the world. He sees this kind of scam of this never-ending cycle of people dying, more people coming to replace them, landlords swindling them out of their money, just people living and dying to no end, people being oppressed, right? He's talking about the slaves, Chinese wall. He mentions Babylon, the Tower of Babylon, which, if you don't know, in the Bible was all the people of the world coming together to build a tower to heaven. And so God, for their hubris, kind of cast them to all the corners of the world and made them speak different languages so they couldn't communicate to build a tower to heaven. No one is anything is how he ends that little passage. He feels very depressed. And it's very interesting because his chapters begin with him kind of cooking breakfast for himself and his cat and his wife, and he seems more joyful than Stephen, who's very self-absorbed and kind of in his own head about all of the sad things that have happened to him. But Bloom himself is also carrying a lot of weight and negativity about the world. I believe this will be the last quote for this section, because I'm about halfway through my chosen quotes. Again, Bloom. He's thinking about food. He says, his inner monologue says, after all, there's a lot in that vegetarian fine flavor of things from the earth. Garlic, of course. It stinks. Italian organ grinders, crisp of onions, mushroom truffles. Pain to animal, too. Pluck and draw fowl. Wretched brutes there at the cattle market, waiting for the poleaxe to split their skulls open. Moo. Poor trembling calves. Meh. Staggering bob. Bubble and squeak. Butcher's buckets, wobble lights. Give us that brisket off the hook. Plup. Raw head and bloody bones. Flayed, glass-eyed sheep hung from their haunches. Sheep snouts bloody papered, sniveling nose jam on sawdust. Top and lashers going out. Don't maul them pieces, young one. Hot fresh blood they prescribe for decline. Blood always needed, insidious. Lick it up, smoking hot, thick, sugary, famished ghosts. Ah, I'm hungry. So one of Bloom's favorite meals is organ meat. He loves, the first thing he cooks in the book is just a cow kidney, or I think a pig kidney, I believe. But here he's imagining the meat markets and the slaughterhouses and the violence of it. And I think we see some parallels to his view of the world through more capitalist structures, right? He sees people or animals being victimized and used up. But at the end of the day, right, he's a part of that world. He has this incredibly violent, vivid, bloody monologue, or soliloquy, inner monologue. And then, I'm hungry, Despite the suffering, despite the blood, despite all these animals being killed, he's hungry and he's going to eat. And he himself loves organ meat, so he's an eater of animals, and he participates in this machine, much like he participates in the capitalist machine. Very cool parallel there. Okay, so that's, like I said, that's about halfway through. if I was to continue this video would be far too long, so I'm going to cut this one off here, and I'll come back in the next one with the rest of the quotes. So I hope you can see by now why I really love this book, at least these parts of it. It's just disjointed and difficult to parse sometimes, but it's some truly beautiful, rhythmic, one-of-a-kind prose, so I hope you are able to appreciate it too. Okay, well, see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.